Hey there, A's Day fans. Welcome to our Tuesday edition of our show. Hope you all had a solid, extended holiday weekend with loved ones and enjoying the Thanksgiving season. I know I sure did. I'm your host, Joe Grado. Thank you for joining us for this newest edition of A's Day. Happy December. Today is Tuesday, December 2nd. We got a good show for you with the news of a couple of bullpen reinforcements signing to deals above their market value. We take a look at how that could potentially affect the offseason plans for the A's and some pivots they need to make to be able to add those upgrades to their bullpen, which are much needed. We'll discuss that at the top of the show. And then we're going to have a vision of what this team, this roster is going to look like once they are officially set to move to Las Vegas. So we're going to have a future look into the 2028 Vegas A's team. There are going to be some guys on the roster based on future free agents and potential trades that I think could fit in well with this team, that we put on this team that not necessarily are definitively going to be there, but a vision of how this roster can shape, hopefully by then being a perennial postseason contender. So we got a good show for you. We were going to do some trivia today, but the app was not cooperating with us, so that will have to wait for a future off-season episode. Not too far in the future, but we'll be sure to update you when we are able to make that happen. Let's get to talking about some A's baseball. We're thankful to be here at the start of a new week with all of you, the lovely audience. Holy Toledo, let's go A's. All right there, A's Day fans. Thank you again for joining us for this Tuesday edition of our show. Thank you for being patient with us for the extra day of wait, but we want to make sure that we get it out in a quality fashion. Before we jump into today's show, just want to give you a reminder of where you can find us outside of our podcast episodes, that we add new ones, 2 new episodes per week on your favorite audio podcast platform. Continue to like, subscribe, tell your friends. We want to help this thing grow to bigger heights so that we can improve the type of content that we can issue you, the lovely audience, for your entertainment and knowledge as well. In addition to our podcast episodes, be sure to continue, or if you're new to the show, check us out on our social media channels, on Instagram at A's Day Baseball Podcast, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at A's Day Baseball, and be sure to follow along our YouTube channel at A's Day Baseball Podcast. It'll have the green logo just like you see behind my shoulders if you are watching this edition of our episode of our podcast. We have all of our video shows on there, as well as our player interviews with A's players, as well as content at baseball destination cities all across the country. There's going to be so much more to come in 2026 and beyond, so be sure to check us out there. And to become an official subscriber of A's Day, check out our Patreon site, patreon.com/A's Day. For just $2 a month, you'll be entered to win monthly A's Day t-shirts, A's autographed memorabilia, future A's game tickets, and so much more as we are able to grow this platform collaboratively. All right, let's jump into today's show. So it really piqued my interest over the last week or so when I saw 2 of the higher-end relievers on the open market signed for deals that I think exceeded a lot of people's expectations, including mine. Because the season so if you aren't aware, Ryan Helsley, who was one of the best closers in baseball during his time in St. Louis, he got traded to the Mets during the middle of this past season due to St. Louis not really being in the thick of the postseason race and really didn't have a definitive direction of where they were going. And with the possibility of losing Helsley in free agency without getting anything in return, they wanted to make sure they would get something for his services. So he goes to New York, has one of the worst probably the worst stretch of performances in his MLB career. He had a 4+ ERA over the course of the full season, including a 7.20 ERA over his final 20 or 21 appearances with the Mets. People are chalking that up to an anomaly due to his high strikeout rate over the course of the full season still remaining where it should be. His walk rate was relatively low, although those numbers got flipped topsy-turvy during his time in New York. But they just think that isn't who Helsley is now in his career. So a lot of teams still were garnering his services as a closer. Some teams even inquired of having Helsley transition to a starter. But nevertheless, Baltimore fills the need as their closer, Felix Bautista is set to miss the 2026 season. And so they need a closer. It's a pretty big hole to fill. They feel like Helsley's going to fill that and feel like they're not going to skip a beat there. So he signed a 2-year, $28 million contract, banking on him being a bounce-back candidate. And then the Mets yesterday, they signed Devin Williams because the Mets are kind of in a situation where the highest prized free agent on the market, if you aren't aware, is Edwin Diaz, who has been the Mets closer for the last few years. He returned to form this year. He won the National League Reliever of the Year, All-Star appearance, and was absolutely lights out. Pretty consistent from pole to pole. But he's going to garner a lot of attention on the open market. So I think the Mets wanted to bring in someone as an insurance policy in Devin Williams, who kind of had a topsy-turvy season last year with the Yankees, but by season's end kind of looked more like the pitcher that we had grown accustomed to seeing him during his time in Milwaukee. So the Mets went in that direction. They signed him with a 3-year, $51 million contract, even though Williams posted his career worst ERA, most amount of blown saves, but they are still, these teams are really prioritizing strikeout rate, which out of all qualified relievers, Devin Williams had the second highest at 40%. He was only behind Mason Miller. So I do think there's a lot to like about Williams, and I think if he finds his good fit, which I do think he'll fit in well in Queens, then I think you're going to see a return to form because it was important for Williams. He wanted to stay in New York. Didn't feel like it was necessarily going to be the best fit for him to return to the Yankees. So he gets his wish. He stays in New York, and now he's going to pitch on the other side of the island and pitch in Queens for the Mets. In that situation, if the Mets aren't able to bring back Edwin Diaz, which is still their intended plan, they have Williams sliding as a closer. But if not, Williams has expressed a willingness to slide into that setup man role if they do bring back Diaz. All of a sudden, that turns that Mets bullpen into a liability, into more of an area of strength. So this leaves the best remaining, like I mentioned, Edwin Diaz already, who's expected to garner somewhere about 4 or 5 year deal ranging anywhere from $88 to $105 million. And then you never know what happens if some of these big markets get into a bidding war over Diaz's services. That number can increase even higher. So it's safe to say that in terms from the A scope, I don't believe Edwin Diaz, as great as that would be to have at the end of their bullpen, I don't think that's someone that's a realistic candidate. There's also Robert Suarez that maybe there's a little bit more of a chance to land his services. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of teams interested in him. That can turn into a bidding war too as well. He is in the older stages of his career. He is entering age 35 season, so it could be a shorter term deal. But nevertheless, I do think the A's might get priced out there. Now, there's 2 guys that come to mind that I think the A's could be in play for. But here's the problem. And these 2 guys are Pete Fairbanks and Emilio Pagan. Here's the problem. The A's are fighting an uphill battle, unfortunately. There was a poll that was shared, I think, by The Athletic, where they asked the players and coaches an abundance of different questions, kind of give their perspective on ranking, on basically the pulse of the season, of the league. And I guess there was a list of rankings of where players desire to play. Either it's their own home, or if they were out there in the open market, they gave them options to come up with their ranking list. Well, it turns out West Sacramento, for where the A's are right now, was defined as the least desirable place for anyone to come in terms of via free agency. Now, the reason is because currently the A's are in a temporary home. They're playing in a AAA stadium. And there is that prospect that they are moving, that is the schedule, that is what's been put up forth in terms of planning, that they are expected to move to Vegas to kick off the 2026 season, or 2028 season, excuse me. So with that creates some doubts, I'm sure, in some of these players' minds, especially the players that may have families. Are you really going to take your family right now, go to Sacramento for 2 more seasons and then have to uproot them again and then move to Vegas, where that's where they'll be long term, you would think, with a new stadium. But I think for these next 2 seasons, it's going to be tough to convince a high volume of players, even if this team is in a really good place right now. They keep adding on to their win total. They have a nice young core in place, and they should have a vision to add upon it to get them back into that postseason discussion. But I think players are really taking into account the full experience. And I think while the in-between-the-lines experience is going to be continue to ascend and be an area of positivity for this A's team in 2026 and beyond, there's just a lot of uncertainty, the business side of things, which I think is turning some players off from wanting to come here to be a part of it. I think with the tension between the fan base and the ownership group, I think with that being always riddled in the news, is turning off some guys too as well, giving that overlying theme that ownership isn't investing into this team. And if you look at what they have invested into the payroll right now, it's hard to argue. And I know it's early, and I do know there's an opportunity to bring in an abundance of guys. You have an opportunity to extend guys internally, to have this young core stay together and win games for an extended period of time. You started doing that last offseason with Brett Rooker and Lawrence Butler. I think there's an opportunity to continue that trend with guys like Nick Kurtz and Jacob Wilson and even Tyler Soderstrom. Shea Langoliers would like to, might be a little bit tougher with Scott Boras as his agent, where he likes his clients to hit the open market in free agency. But there's an opportunity for internal extensions. You have the financial flexibility. Would like to see the A's move in some of those directions. So how do you get your way out of an uphill struggle? Sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone. And unfortunately, you don't always love to encourage this, but if you are going to do it, you focus on your team's biggest area of need. And in my opinion, that's pitching. And I think in order, it would be bullpen and starting pitching as your 2 top areas of need. We're talking bullpen today. So what does that mean? You don't like it, but like I said, there is that financial flexibility that what are you going to have to do if you don't have everything to offer in terms of home? Sometimes you're going to have to throw out a little extra money and spend a bit above market value. I do know that's not necessarily encouraged if we were at a business school. So if you're a business professor or you're pursuing your business degree, I apologize. This isn't the standard method of operations in terms of being a functional business. But when you have a lot of those good assets in place and you need to just add a couple pieces here and there to get that machine flowing to the positive direction that I think a lot of people envision for 2026 and the near future after that, sometimes you got to spend money. Sometimes it has to get a little bit uncomfortable. For example, like a Pete Fairbanks. That's why I mentioned Pete Fairbanks and Emilio Pagan, because those are guys that I think could be a little bit more under control in terms of what you have to dish out. But I think to stand out, because both of those guys are garnering a lot of interest, including Pete Fairbanks. Seems like there's 3 or 4 teams this week that are in on him. If he's garnering something about, I think I saw something, a 1-year $9 million deal or 2-year $16. Maybe it's going to be 2 years, 26. Maybe you give him that 3rd-year option. You're going to have to do something to get creative, was what I'm trying to say. Same thing with Emilio Pagan. He's expected somewhere 3 years, I think $10 million a year, $10 to $13 million a year. Might have to go a bit above that. Maybe you have to go in the 14 to 17 range. Like I said, that's not ideal, and that's not the best business principle that you want to set a tone consistently for years to come. But sometimes you're going to have to pivot, especially when you're in an area you're not holding all the cards. These free agents are. Just because of the public perception around the league of where the A's are currently in terms of their home base. In order to supplement what this team needs to help it continue to move forward, especially for this season, that might be a possibility. You might see, bringing in a Fairbanks. Wouldn't be surprised if it's 2-year $30 with a 3rd-year option. That's a lot, especially a guy that's pitched a lot of baseball. But if that's an area that you're looking to bring in someone that has that bona fide closer experience and bring that theme of having someone shut down, Fairbanks that could be a guy where you spend a little bit extra. Pagan, same things. That's why I was saying, I do not believe the A's would want to get into a bidding war for Edwin Diaz. What if that number gets up to 115, 120? That's way too much, in my opinion, to invest into a one-inning guy. So I think there are some avenues where the A's could extend a little bit ahead of what a team typically would provide with some of these relievers. But I think they have to be smart at the end of the day. But that is how they're going to have to get creative, is money, financials. Money talks, and it doesn't talk to everyone, but it can't hurt to throw out some creative deals just to get yourself into the mix and make the improvements that you need to be a much better overall club. So I think they're going to have to act this week. And I think Fairbanks is one guy they're going to have to connect with his camp, because there's rumors swirling around him that he may sign with the team before next week's winter meeting start on Monday. It's Tuesday, so you don't have a lot more time with him. I'm sure Pagan is going to go pretty quick. And then it starts to really thin out in terms of closure you can get on the free agent market. Now, there's always an opportunity to execute a trade. Sure, why not? But without having to give up anything besides financials, this is your period, and that window's closing. So I do think that, do they have options internally that can be significant additions to this bullpen? Absolutely. I think there are guys that can step up that got that good experience at the second half of the season that I think are ready for bigger roles. But I think it would be nice to add some depth, because who you break camp with isn't going to be that same exact unit that you end the season with. With the combination of ineffectiveness, the unfortunate nature of injuries, they're always there. You're going to have to bring in a stable of guys. You're always going to need an abundance of arms to get through 162. And if you play well enough, some games beyond that in the postseason too as well. So I think they got to step out of the box and and get creative in order to be competitive against their MLB peers in order to improve their roster. So that's my thoughts there. Let's get to the back half of today's show. It's going to be a little bit shorter. That's how some of these off-season episodes go, especially when there haven't been any transactions that the A's have been a part of. I'm sure it's going to ramp up over this next couple of weeks or so. We'll have more on what the A's are adding to the roster to make them a better unit in 2026. But while we wait for that, let's set our sights and visions to the future. What could the team look like in 2028 when it's set to play opening day in Vegas or wherever they are? Because they could start on the road that year. But once they're officially all moved out to Vegas, want to start with the position players. It's going to sound very similar to what they have heading into this season, to be honest. And it's kind of hard to fully envision who would be coming in here, who would be leaving. But I do think with them having the third youngest lineup in baseball, there's going to be a lot of that core that stays. There's going to be some prospects that get called up, I think, between now and then. And I think so that's how we determine this, based on some future free agent classes, prospect timelines, kind of equated that in a way, just throwing some thoughts out there. We don't know what it's going to look like, but it would be pretty cool if it got to this some sort of shape and form. So let's start with the position players. We think catchers is going to be Shea Langoliers and then Daniel Susac, as long as no one picks him up, since he is left unprotected this year, will serve as the backup catcher. I think Nick Kurtz will be the first baseman. They'll have flexibility if something were to happen to him. You can have Tyler Soderstrom slide over there. Brett Rooker could play some first base too as well. I believe that the middle infield is going to have Leo DeVries at second base and Jacob Wilson at shortstop. So I think those two are going to be up the middle. Maybe those two flip if they feel like DeVries can offer a little bit more defensively at short. But nevertheless, I think those are going to be your tandem up the middle. Then over at third base, really couldn't commit to them bringing in a free agent or slamming a trade or executing a trade. So looking at Max Muncy and Darryl Hernandez as options over there. Hernandez provides that versatility. He can play all infield spots aside from first base and catch. But he could play third, he could play short, he could play second. I think that's very valuable for a team. Then out in the outfield, you're going to have a mix of Tyler Soderstrom in left. I think Denzel Clark will be the center fielder. And Henry Bolte will be on the roster. Lawrence Butler in right. And then Devin Taylor, who's currently in their system. He was a part of their draft class last year. I believe he is going to be in the mix by then. And then Brent Rooker will still be under contract. He'll serve as the team's designated hitter. And over on the starting pitching side of things, we got a little bold here. So we believed that they were going to make some moves this year with guys that are going to still be on the roster from this 2026 team through 2028 on extended contracts. So we believe that they do get their ace in this season's offseason class. We believe that Ranger Suarez will be their ace, and then they're going to execute a trade with the Minnesota Twins and bring over Pablo Lopez. So I do think there is going to be a change at the top of the rotation come 2028. Jeffrey Springs will be a free agent by there, and I think Severino's contract is done too as well. I think those contracts are structured that way on purpose, and I think they have longer-term visions in that rotation. So I believe that it'll be Suarez, Lopez, or guys of that type. So I think that's kind of where I think they're going to go out there and get their true ace, and I think they're going to get another ace-type guy to back them up too as well, and then be rounded out with Luis Morales, Jacob Lopez, and then their first-round pick, Jamie Arnold. I think we'll round out the rotation. That'll be pretty solid going into that 2028 campaign. Then out in the bullpen, we believe to be something like Jack Perkins, Brady Basso, Eduardo Nunez, Henry Baez, JT Ginn, Hogan Harris, and then I believe they're going to make some moves in the bullpen too as well. Whether they get him this year or if he opts out, depending on what his contract looks like, and re-enters free agency next year. But I believe they're going to get Pete Fairbanks. I think they're going to get a closer on top of that too as well. I think Fairbanks will be the closer 2027 and then or 2026. We'll see. Depends on how this season goes. And then we believe that Johan Duran, who is going to be a free agent heading into the 2028 season, I think the A's are going to put their chips in the middle of the table and go in for him. And then having that Fairbanks-Duran duo at the back end is really going to make the A's a feared bullpen and really bridge the gap solidly from the starters going 6-7 innings to those two guys on a regular nightly basis. That would be fun to watch. But I could see that. Again, these are players' examples filling these holes, but I believe these are the types of areas where the A's are going to improve over these next 2 to 3 seasons and have a more consistent product that can be a legitimate World Series contender down the road. So very excited to see what the future holds, but I think you got to lay the foundation between now and then. Like, I think this is an important year in terms of how you present yourself in the free agent market. And I think if you are willing to spend a little bit more, I think by the time that those Vegas times come around, Las Vegas is going to be a sought-after destination for free agents as compared to West Sacramento. No disrespect, just a bigger market. That's just the nature of the beast. So I do think they'll make it a little bit easier for the A's to land some major free agents then, as long as they maintain their good player relations over these next 2 seasons. And I know it kind of got off to a little bit of a rocky start with Luis Severino, but it seemed like cooler heads prevailed, and now there's a good open communication relationship between General Manager David Forrest and Luis Severino, who was signed on to be the team's ace. He's got 2 more years on his deal. But I do think there is an opportunity for the A's to really right the ship of their poor image. I think they need to be creative. They need to be flexible. And the decisions that they make today, this offseason, can really impact 2027 and can really impact the start of their Vegas time, where the expectation should be the A's being regular competitors in the postseason dance. Because then if not, what has all this been for? You know, it seems like they've really done a good job of their player development, graduating a lot of guys from their minor league system and making their major league debuts, especially this past season. You see this young core, it was a top 10 offense, and they were the 3rd youngest lineup in baseball. So that means, to me, they got so much more in the tank that they haven't even gotten to. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But I think they got to improve the pitching drastically, and they need to present a plan to free agent pitchers, and they need to execute some trades too as well, maintain those good relations with their peers throughout the league too as well. But in terms of the free agent side, they really need to get creative with their pitch as to why it makes a lot of sense for so-and-so to be a member of the 2026 or 2027 A's in West Sacramento. Because the location, I think Sacramento is a great place, but I think the stadium leaves a lot to be desired in terms of for what major leaguers are expecting. It's a nice venue, but I think players at the major league level expect a little bit more just because of what they've grown accustomed to playing at all the other 29 parks. So I do think there's a little bit of an uphill battle there, but at the end of the day, I think the vision is bright, and I do think that 2028 roster in Las Vegas is going to be one that should be built to be contenders for the division and beyond in the postseason race and in the postseason tournament as well. Like, I think by then, this young core is going to have so many innings under their belt, play together. I think that team unity is important, to learn to win together, to learn to overcome adversity together, and to become better ball players together. And I think this young core that's come up together and the pieces that you add around it to supplement it, I think you're going to see a new decade of A's baseball that many green and gold faithful are going to be quite proud of. All right. And with that, that brings us to the conclusion of another edition of A's Day. Like I mentioned, a little bit shorter today, but that's all we had to share with you. We don't want to drone on and on unless there are an abundance of things going on in A's world. On today's show, we discussed after two major free agent signings went down in terms of bullpen reinforcements, we took a look at what that could mean in terms of for the A's offseason plans and what ways they need to pivot or to stand out amongst the crowd to be able to land one of these bona fide closers before they all find new homes and it's too late. And then before we get on out of here for the second topic of discussion, we just gave our vision of what the 2028 roster could look like once this A's team officially moves to Las Vegas. So a lot of the young core we came to determine is going to still be in place as we are going to see in 2026. We do believe there are some areas where we may see a couple prospects make the roster, and maybe in this year's class next year, they upgraded second base or third base. But all in all, I think the majority of what you see this year is still going to be there in 2028 in Las Vegas, unless there is significant reduction across the board. But I do think there's going to be a lot of change in terms of the starting rotation. I do think by then they're going to have two bona fide starters. They're going to be an improvement over Springs and Severino. And then I think they are going to add at least two bona fide guys at the back end of their bullpen. I'm sure there'll be some depth all between each on each side of the baseball. But I do think the A's are going to take significant steps over these next couple of seasons so that if they don't have some winning seasons while in Sacramento, which I do think they are going to, I do think the capability is there, they're going to be sure that when they are first introducing this team to a new market in Vegas, that they're going to make sure this team is ready to win and to be participants in the postseason so that they can also help offset some of those costs from the new stadium, making postseason appearances. That's going to add more financial capital to your payroll too as well. So we talked about all that today. Short, sweet, and to the point. We want to make sure we stay all abreast and stay all in tune in our excitement as we are another day closer to A's baseball being back, to the first sounds of spring training, all the way to opening day for 2026. We'll be back on Friday behind the mic. We're going to continue on with this player in A's history. We're going to keep it more recent and pick a player from the 2020s that's no longer with the A's, but we'll tell the story of someone that all of you may be more familiar with as compared to kicking it back to the 30s or 40s. And then we'll share with you any transactions that go over this week. I have a feeling they may make a couple of moves. If not, you may see more of a flurry of signings beginning next season. But whatever's out there, we'll be sure to share with you an update and give our thoughts and keep us all connected on A's baseball. That's all I have for you today. Appreciate you spending part of your Tuesday with us. Once again, I'm your host, Joe Grado. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be able to talk A's baseball with each and every one of you. Have a great day, and we'll see you again for Friday's show. Play ball.